We've got the deadline of the end of January, which is when they want to get all this through by. We understand that he's going to reintroduce the withdrawal agreement bill before Christmas. I'm not sure whether there'll be time for it to actually be debated, to have its second reading. There's very little time now before the Christmas break. But they will certainly be concentrating on that a lot in early January in the House of Commons, and then it will need to move to the House of Lords and come back to the Commons if there have been any amendments in the Lords. The last time when the withdrawal agreement bill was introduced, the big row was not actually about the principle of the bill, it was about the timetable, because Johnson proposed only 3 days for Commons scrutiny. So one of the first things to look out for is how much time is he offering. He's going to have a much more compliant House of Commons this time. I don't think there's much risk of him getting voted down on any of this stuff.
The reaction in the EU has been relatively mixed so far. On the one hand, there's a clear sigh of relief that we finally have clarity. There are still those considerable numbers in the EU who obviously regret that the UK is leaving the EU, but the process has been dragging on, and the dragging on hasn't really been positive for either side. However, at the same time, there is this slight apprehension on the EU side about how prepared the UK is to go into that second phase, how it will negotiate, what it wants, and who will do the negotiating. So in that respect, a little bit of Groundhog Day.
Throughout this whole Brexit period, we've had very tight majorities or even no majority in the House of Commons. So there's been a huge amount of negotiating with backbenchers, questions of whether you can bring people over to support the government from the Labour side and that kind of thing. That's all over now. Johnson has a very comfortable Conservative majority. They're liable to be very tolerant, certainly in the early phase, particularly because a lot of them are new. They're going to be finding their feet at Westminster. They're going to be much more accepting of the policies that he puts in front of them, at least certainly before the 31st of January. An interesting question is what will happen with the House of Lords, because there's a sort of dynamic whereby when the House of Commons gets weaker, sometimes the House of Lords steps up and it then tries to hold the government more to account.
So the big majority in Parliament will obviously help Johnson with the next phase in the sense of formulating a mandate. It will also very clearly make things much smoother in terms of ratification at the end. Things have obviously held up phase one, if you like. But it doesn't help very much with the negotiating and the EU side of things. For one, it is because a lack of domestic constraint on Johnson in some respects even holds him back. He can no longer claim that he can't get things through Parliament in order to press his point. On the other hand as well, you get on the EU side a very clear sense that they now need to get things done in a very quick time frame.
There's a very big question about the structure of parliamentary committees. I mean, parliamentary committees in the Commons tend to mirror the government departments, and we've heard talk about DEXU being abolished. If DEXU, the department, is abolished, then the committee that shadows it will be abolished. That's Hilary Benn's committee. So we remain to see those things. But once we enter the next phase after the 31st of January of negotiation, if DEXU is not there anymore and its committee is gone, there will be questions about whether there should be some kind of new structures specifically to oversee the negotiations.
The biggest issue at this point is time pressure. Currently, in order to complete the deal, Johnson only has until the 31st of December 2020. That is no time at all for a comprehensive trade deal. Should he want to extend that transition, he has to request such an extension by the end of June. Now, he has said repeatedly that he does not want to do that. This means that there is a lot of pressure on both sides to agree highly complex questions in a very, very short moment of time, because time pressure in this moment once again is against Boris Johnson's interests. He will, if he wants to stick to the timetable, have to accede to many more EU demands than he would ideally like. But suffice it to say, they're likely to be a quite formidable negotiating partner.